Get everybody attention, please. Attention. Can you hear me in the back? Can you hear me back there? Okay, if you guys can't hear me, wave your hand and say something. We'll make sure you get us to going here, all right? I like that. I know quite a few of you here, so this is kind of fun. Welcome to Candidates Night, sponsored by the Goldendale Grange. They've done this for like 10 years in a row, and one of the people who's been doing this for a long time. Where is she at? She's hiding over there. She is. Lucille. Lucille. Yeah. Thank you, Lucille, for doing this. Thank you. Yeah. Everybody, make sure your phone is off. Okay, we just want to make sure that happens. My name is Scott Robinson. I have been asked to serve for your moderator for the event. I'll be assisted by Michael McBride and Mr. DeHart here, who will be our timer. Mike will be doing the questions over here for us, so that's how it's going to go on that end. Please, at this time, join me for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Right here.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I want to ask everybody here to respect the candidates when they're speaking. No clapping and no shouting. They need to have their opportunity to speak to the public without interruptions, okay? We're allowing ourselves a couple hours for this. We don't want to go to midnight, but we would like time for everybody to have questions and answers and everybody have a good event here so everybody can hear what's going on. This year's general election on November 6th is extremely important. We have a number of critical positions that are contested. The ballots are going to be mailed out October 19th. Get out and vote, okay? You guys, everybody, get out and vote. That's what we're here for. So tell your friends and your neighbors and tell them to vote. I'll read the format. It's written here. For contested positions, we will use a question and answer format. We will accept written questions, which they've been putting over on the table. If you have any, please pass them to the right and get them over to the table so they can sort them out. Each candidate has a 3-minute to introduce themselves and state why they are running their platform and their goals and their position. They'll have 2 minutes to respond to the questions. The timer keeper here in front of us has a yellow paddle when they have 1 minute left and the red paddle when they're to stop.
You're going to use it.
This is not a debate, okay? I was asked to say that, I'll say it again. This is not a debate, okay? Let's start our night with any letters from candidates who couldn't make it, and I have a friend right here. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Chente Benavides, and I'm the Central Washington Field Director for the Susan Hutchinson campaign. Based in Cleveland, Washington. I work out of the office in Ellensburg, our GOP office, and I just want to touch on a few things that Susan wanted to get out to as many potential voters as possible. So just on one thing, she wants to make very clear that she 100% supports our President of the United States and wants to go to Washington to help support his agenda. She wanted to make it very clear that she supports Judge Kavanaugh, our new Supreme Court Justice. If she was in Washington, she would have voted yes on Kavanaugh. She wanted to make that very clear. Also, she's very proud of the job our president's done so far as the economy. Some of you that know Susan know she's very pro-jobs. She's pro-military. In fact, she comes from a military family. Her husband is an expert marksman, supports the Second Amendment, NRA member, and also served in the armed forces as a Marine, so in the Marine Corps. So just wanted to pass that along. Some of the other views that she's very strong about, she believes in a strong border. She does support building the wall. One of the other things that she's passionate about is simplifying our tax code. She feels that the IRS has gone way rogue and is making it more and more difficult with more rules and regulations for when folks do their taxes. So she really wants to help simplify the tax code. As far as Washingtonians are concerned, she's pro-ag. She wants to also go to Washington to help support the agricultural industry. She's pro-property rights, pro-water rights for farmers, and that's also something she wanted to convey. Also, a few other things that I just want to cover really quick. As far as the drain the swamp, Susan is very pro term limits. So she wanted to make sure that was conveyed to potential voters. She really believes that more people should have a right to serve at that capacity for our country rather than a select few. A lot of you know when these guys get into Washington, they build an apparatus around them. It's pretty tough to get them out. So she wants to make sure that I made it clear that she's definitely for term limits. Other than that, thank you very much for your support. And really, one other thing that I got to throw out there. The reality is this is probably the most important election of our lifetime for the midterms, and I'm getting waved at, so just get out and vote. Thank you very much, appreciate it. Thank you.
Is there a spokesman here for Senator Cantwell?
Got to get close.
Hey everyone, my name's Alex Hall. I'm not quite a spokesman for Senator Cantwell, but I am her Central Washington campaign representative. And once again, I'm happy to be here participating in this community forum. And I believe that community forums like these are a fundamental part of democracy, and where we can come together and hear about the issues. And I was born and raised a couple hours away from here in Richland, Washington, and I value the communities I am a part of, and I believe that Senator Cantwell fights for those communities and as well as all Americans regardless of party. In 2015 she was named Wheat Leader of the Year, and she has a proven record for standing up for agriculture through expanding searching for new markets abroad for our crops here in Washington and Clickitat County as well. Senator Cantwell also stands up for clean energy and is working with leaders here in this county to come up with clean energy solutions on the Columbia River. And those are a few reasons why I support Senator Cantwell, and I encourage you to support her too. And thanks for letting me speak.
Michael, did they have any questions for the Cantwell and Susan Hutchinson?
I can't answer questions. I'm not.
Okay.
I'm just a campaigner, not a.
Please don't let me answer
Ask questions is there any questions for Susan Hutchinson?
No. I'd be happy to speak to people individually after.
There's no questions for either one of those candidates.
Alex said he'd be happy to answer questions later on if anybody has any questions for him. And I'm sure Susan's representative would too. All right. Well, we'll just keep moving right along. At this time, I'm going to give the microphone to Jaime Herrera Beutler and let her do her introduction.
Thank you. Well, I'm here today because I want to keep serving Southwest and South Central Washington back in DC. I know it's special to this area because I grew up here. This is where my family raised us, not too far from here. And I know that this is the greatest place in the country, and I want to keep it as a good place to get a job, to raise a family, or to retire. And I'm really pleased that my laser-like focus on our economy is finally paying off. You know, when I took office in 2011, we were in the worst jobs market since the Great Depression, actually, is what they said. You know, Clickitat County's unemployment rate at that point was 15.2%. Today, fast forward, it's 4.6%. And it's taken a lot of work to get here. You know, I was at my 8th annual jobs fair in the spring, and I cruised up alongside this one gentleman. I said, "What kind of job are you looking for?" And he said, "I actually already have a job, but I'm looking to see what else is out there for me, what's better on the horizon." And that was music to my ears. I'm gonna fight to sustain the greatest jobs market we have seen in a decade. I'll also fight to protect and preserve Social Security and Medicare. These are vital trust funds that seniors have spent their entire working life paying into, and I'm gonna fight against any plan that's gonna dismantle or destroy them. I also believe that we must make sure that we're putting policy ideas ahead of partisanship. You know, in my time in Congress, I've learned that if you want to put your shoulder to the wheel and work on a solution, there's no shortage of opportunities. You know, we've worked on some like making sure that there are visibility markers on the Big Eddy transmission line, or making sure there was dredging down at Underwood, or making sure that the critical access hospitals here have continued to function at 101% reimbursement. Because in rural areas, we have to have that to have access. And I'm pleased to have made sure that we put into law that really a tax bill that has impacted every single one of us. The average family here is keeping $2,300 a year. The average single mom in this country is saving 70% of her taxes, and we have seen this economy absolutely explode. This race is shaping up into a real contrast. My opponent has pledged to repeal this tax bill that has brought on the most prosperous jobs market we've seen in a decade. She's also pledged to undo Medicare and turn it into a single payer plan that will cost $32 trillion and bankrupt it as we know it. These are things that are wrong for South Central Washington, they're wrong for our families, and I'm standing up to fight on behalf of this growth in this economy and on behalf of a bright future. Thank you.
Carolyn Long.
Thank you. Well, welcome, and thanks to the Goldendale Grange for organizing this. My name is Carolyn Long, and I'm running for the Congress in the 3rd Congressional District. Because I'm unfamiliar to some of you, I want to introduce myself and tell you why I'm running and correct the factual errors that we've already started with in this debate. I grew up in rural communities throughout the Pacific Northwest, so I know what it's like to grow up in an area where jobs are scarce. I know what it's like to own and operate a small business. My dad had a small business that I worked at from the age of 12, where I proudly learned a trade, which came in handy when I got a job as a local journeyman at Safeway running their produce department. I then went to graduate school after going to school for an undergraduate degree, and then have been teaching at Washington State University, Vancouver for 23 years. Very proud. Go Cougs, if there's any of you out there. One of the things that I really love about the work that I've done as a professor at WSU Vancouver is the work I've done in bringing civility back into politics. I study political institutions, and our institutions are absolutely broken because of hyper-partisanship. You know, another way they're broken is because of negative campaigning. We all see it. We're seeing it in this race, and it's regrettable because I think people end up not participating in a democracy when the rhetoric gets so high. When people demonize one another rather than finding ways to come together. When people tell misleading things about their opponent because they can't win on the issues. So let's start with that. I have held 42 town halls in the last 11 months. There are 60 hours of audio tape that my opponent has, which states my positions on health care, which is not a single payer system, which states my positions on Medicare and Social Security, which is supporting them, not using the deficit and the debt created by the tax bill to cut into them, which is what we hear happening from the Senate Leader Mitch McConnell today. Also on the tax bill, there are parts of the tax bill I don't like. The 82% of the benefits that go to the wealthiest Americans, and what is important about that is corporations get permanent tax cuts, whereas individuals don't, and wealthy Americans are prospering in this economy. But what is most critical is the fact that we are borrowing from future generations to pay for those tax cuts. We're borrowing from my daughter's generations, from some of your grandchildren, some of your children, to pay for tax cuts to people who are already benefiting this economy. Do we need to have tax cuts for working class families? Absolutely. Do we need to have tax cuts to help small businesses like my dad's produce stand? Absolutely. But when 82% of what is happening in that tax bill helps people who are also profiting already in this economy, then I think we need to move in another direction. Finally, I think that it is great that the unemployment rate is down. That's fantastic. It is only one barometer of economic health. Look at wage stagnation. It is a problem. We've had 3.9% growth this last quarter, and we're excited. We're 20 points behind where we should be. Look at the fact that your prescription drugs are increasing almost 300% in the last 8 years. Look at the fact that your consumer goods are increasing because of this trade war. All that means is that this economy is not nearly as healthy as a few selective statistics will reveal. I'm so thrilled to be here to clarify my positions on all of the issues, to meet you for the second time. This is my second time in Goldendale. The first was the town hall, 1 of 42. Thank you very much.
We're going to go right into our questions for the candidates at this time. I'm going to ask Michael over there, do you have a question for one of our candidates?
Yes, I do. This is on immigration. It's for both of them, and I'll start with Carolyn. I'll read what they said about immigration first. Nearly everyone agrees that there is a need for a major revision in current U.S. immigration policy. I attended Candidate Long's gathering in Lisle last week, where she went through a long list of immigration comments. For Candidate Long, I'm asking you to be more specific and tell us what immigration bills your party, the Democrats, have brought up for vote or have officially in committee that you, if you were a congressperson, would vote for or against.
So the long list that I provided was quite specific on my policies. As far as current bills, I know that there is bipartisan support for a DREAM Act, so it's not just my party, it's also the Republican Party. I support that. That's a promise we made to Dreamers. I think we ought to honor that promise. I have Democrats now who are working on legislation to deal with the political refugee crisis on the border, where children are being stripped away from their parents still, and we have a reunification problem. I back that as well. And that is actually different from immigration, but there's bipartisan support for that as well. I also think we have to look at immigration reform a little bit more comprehensively, and this is where that bipartisan support starts to strip away a little. So I think we need to look at a guest worker program that is expanded, so we have the workers to be in our farms, in the shellfish industry, places in small rural communities that are struggling to find labor because of the draconian deportation crisis that's happening. So that's the other thing that I would support, is going back to the way we did deportations. When somebody's a criminal, they're deported, not just because they are here illegally. And finally, I think we do have to talk about border security. But I very much am not in favor of border security that looks like a wall. I think that infrastructure spending can be done in so many more productive ways, which not only creates jobs, but deals with the problem of illegal immigration. As many of you know, half of the people who are here illegally do not come over a border in Mexico. They fly over here and they overstay their visas. So I'm very much against immigration policies that don't get to the root of the problem, and I'm very much in favor of bipartisan legislation that I've talked about, that I was specific about here and in Lisle, which actually has that bipartisan support. Too often we muddy the waters, and that's problematic for policymaking.
Go ahead.
Thank you. As the first Hispanic to actually represent this state, either in the House or the Senate, this is a huge issue for me personally. I supported a bill this summer that would have put in a workable guest worker program that's going to help our ranchers and our farmers in our, whether it's our timber, whether it's our ranching, whether it's aquaculture. We got to make sure that there's a workable guest worker program, and it also would have eliminated it would have put in place a merit-based system and eliminated the visa lottery, making sure that we're getting the folks here that we know want to be a part of this country. It would have also made sure that there was a returning worker exemption for the H-2B slots. So it's making it work more efficiently. It also included funding for a wall, because I don't think it's radical to say we need to know who's coming in and out of our borders. Every country, more socialized, more liberal countries do this. We just need to make sure that we're keeping it orderly and keeping it in place. I voted to send money down to make sure that we have more adjudication law judges to move through that backlog. And this bill also put in place fairness and certainty for DACA recipients, because I do think we need to keep that promise. And it made sure that family separations would not be the policy of the United States. So it was a very robust bill, and unfortunately it has not made its way. It didn't pass. Not as many people, there was bipartisan support, but not as many people wanted to move it forward, and I'm going to keep fighting on this issue. And I think bipartisanship is critical. Georgetown University just ranked all 400, it was actually 438 of us, counting delegates, members of Congress, in terms of our, not just what we say, but what we've done. I was ranked 15th out of all 438 members because of the work I've done to cross party lines for real solutions for the people I serve. And if you re-elect me, I'll continue that same track.
Next question, Mike.
Yes, this is for both candidates also.
You want to go first? Go ahead.
Lyle Point was part of the urban growth boundary at the passage of the Columbia River Gorge NSA Act. Since then, the point has gone into ownership by the tribal entities. So, Lyle has lost a lot of the land meant for growth. What do you plan to do to help local residents get their urban growth areas back, increased, and protected?
This is an issue that doesn't just impact this county. I have, all my counties in the gorge have come into contact with this, whether there's land being set off of private rolls that makes it to where those who are trying to earn a living and there'd be a tax base for there to be police and fire and schools, they have very little in terms of gross receipts. I've worked very hard to protect private property and only move forward in a way that allows win-win compromises. You know, one example, and a lot of this comes from just the federal overreach. U.S. Fish and Wildlife, I can remember, came and said, we're going to put this land where the spotted frog could be under, and we're going to make it listed, and we're going to say, ranchers, if you happen to hurt the spotted frog, you're going to be liable for that. This was, again, causing us in these areas to not be able to be productive on our land. And I stepped in and helped broker a compromise. And actually, they're using it as a solution elsewhere in the nation where we have these problems. So there's still conservation measures being taken place for the spotted frog, but we're not holding the ranchers liable. They're able to keep ranching. And we have similar issues with regard to water rights that I'm actively engaging in. You know, some of the things that we've seen happen is either been with regard to tribal challenges, right? Or it's the federal government saying you can't use this land. And honestly, a lot of the work I do is trying to wrestle that away and come into compromise that allows people here to live and thrive. The federal overreach, whether it's setting aside forests and telling us we can't use them, or it's setting aside beautiful areas, but to the detriment of the local rural community, has been one of my biggest fights in Congress, and we have some real solutions there. So thank you for the question.
Very nice. There you go.
Thanks.
Carolyn Long.
So I think the question was about tribes and them actually having an issue in terms of reclaiming the land. So I want to go to that and then talk just more generally about urban growth. I think that and I'm not familiar with this particular case in Lyle, but if the tribes are claiming that land, I think we have a responsibility to respect their right to that land that's been historically theirs. Not knowing enough about it, I'd have to go into the details and find out whether or not that claim is appropriate or not. But I think we have a responsibility to, protect tribal people. On the issue of urban growth boundaries, that is very much a local issue that I think is best left up to the local authorities. So I don't see a role in terms of the federal government. I did hear my opponent talk a little bit about conservation and the tensions between conservation and growth. That's a tension that is always going to exist in unincorporated areas, in areas that are growing, and I think that it is something that really has to be dealt with at the local level with input from the people who are in this area. And then finally, I want to mention that I don't see why we have to always look at I have this and you have that tension between this zero-sum game in terms of land, in terms of the environment, in terms of jobs. What I found historically is that collaboration and input from the community is always the most successful way of resolving these problems at the local level as much as possible, and that if the federal government can be productive and helpful for them to step in. So I think that is something that I would bring to the halls of Congress. I started something in the university called the Initiative for Public Deliberation, where I bring people together to find common ground. I've been walking the walk for the last 4 years. I've earned support from my community and awards for that, and I think we could bring that approach to local communities to address those types of questions. Thank you.
Next question, Mike.
Yes, this is for both candidates also.
No, I think we should go back. That's fine. Yeah, she can go first. Thanks. Sorry.
What is the most important element of a free society?
Ooh, that's good.
I think the most important element is a healthy, robust democracy. What I mentioned in my introduction is how dismayed I am at the state of our politics. We have political institutions that are fraying at the edges. It's because we have income inequality. It's because political parties are more interested in demonizing the other side than working collaboratively. It's because we have elections that are won by people who are bought and paid for by special interests. It's why I don't take any corporate PAC money. It's people who decide to opt out of politics, either running or contributing because it's gotten so ugly that they just don't want to see any bit of it anymore. Our democracy is at risk. It's not only in our political institutions, it's in the White House, because the rate of our dialogue now has gotten so hot, so evil-minded and tempered, and people are just disappointed. So in order to have a free society, have a safe society, you need to have a democratic society. And the way you have a democratic society is to hire the right types of people to elected office. People who are beholden to constituents and not special interests. People who will fight for you every single day. People who show up. That's why I've held 42 town halls in front of 3,350 people, because I show up, I look you in the eye, and I tell you what my positions are. It's also why I think a free and robust democracy requires debates. It isn't a debate, as you told us, but I've offered to debate my opponent 4 times, and we've not been able to do so. So the combined amount of time that you will see both of us together is going to be under 2 hours. That is not healthy for a healthy democracy, which I think is key to a free society. And finally, you participating, you coming here, is what gives me hope that our society is on the mend, because you're interested in politics, you're interested in hearing what we have to say, and I hope by the end of the day you're interested in supporting a candidate who truly thinks she can mend democracy, because it certainly needs mending.
What is the most important element of a free society?
You know, I think it all comes down to integrity, quite frankly. The folks in DC in each district really reflect the values of the people they serve, which is why I question San Francisco sometimes. But you know what? They're sending their representative to DC. And you know, I think the underpinning there with regard to integrity is just the basic freedom and the liberty to run your family, own your land, make decisions about your health care, where your kids are going to go to school. Those liberties, I don't have to tell anybody here, it's not just a local issue. The federal government comes in and encroaches on every area of our life. You know, we'd do okay if it wasn't for federal regulations and rules trying to run and rule every single place. You see it in the schools, you see it in the hospitals, you see it on the roads. Talk to any one of our local electeds. That's some of their biggest challenges, which is why I fought to throw off that yoke as much as I possibly can in favor of the liberty of the individual. And the other thing I think is a problem, you know, I don't think it's that our democracy is broken. I do think there are people in it who don't tell the truth. You know, my opponent is backtracking left and right. But let me read you a few quotes. Don't take my word for it. She told the Daily News, and this is a quote from the Daily News in June. Long said she would vote for a so-called Medicare for All bill if Democrats win back control of Congress next year. But she said the chances of such a bill passing would be nil. In April, she told a very liberal podcast, he said to her, with your incremental approach, do you ever see yourself supporting a Medicare for All type healthcare program? She said, absolutely, absolutely. She told the Wakaika Miko, then at some point we have to start talking about single payer. She's backtracked in several ways. I have another list of quotes with regard to her support for the tax bill. She keeps saying, well, she likes it now for the average folks, just wants to repeal it on certain folks. Well, in August, when she was asked by an interviewer on KGW's on TV, he said, hey, we're seeing 4% growth at the economy. Knowing that now, would you have voted against the tax bill if you'd have been in Congress? And she said, oh, I would have voted against it. In August, she told the Columbian Edward, I would not have voted for that bill. I would repeal it if I could. So I do think facts matter and the truth matters. Thank you.
We're going to have one more question for each candidate, and then we'll give them time for closing statement. Michael, you want a question there?
Okay, this one's for Jamie. Between a public option and a single payer system.
Well, I think what I'm seeing now, and I don't promote actually either of those. I think they're both a problem. You know, I had to step in and click a tab the 11th hour last year when out of the exchange, there was no option on the individual market. And the insurance commissioner allowed it. We had to step in and go to bat just to make sure there was one insurer for people to choose from, or they were just gonna have to pay a fine. So I've seen it crumbling, and I would suppose that this is what people call a public option, because you can go through the exchange. A single payer, as people have talked about it to me, has been more of a full government-wide. There's no other options. Both of them are problematic. Both are problematic, partially because we can't afford them, right? My opponent talked about the cost of the tax bill. Some of the biggest tags for the tax bill are around $1 trillion. We're already paying that back, and then some, because of the expansion of the economy. It's growing at twice the rate it was last year. But the Medicare for All or the single payer plan would cost $32 trillion. 32 times the tax bill. 32 times. We could double everyone's federal income taxes, and we still wouldn't pay for it. And I just ask you, with double-digit premium increases, with higher deductibles, with more challenges in getting in to see primary care docs under the ACA, imagine doubling that, making that the plan for the whole nation. Meaning if you work for a union, you get your plan through your union sponsor, that goes away. Meaning if you have private insurance, it gets destroyed. Meaning if you're on Medicare, it ends as we know it. Nothing could be more harmful to our system. I think we have to move forward with a plan that opens up the market, which is why I've co-sponsored a bill to allow the safe importation of prescription drugs from Canada, which would cost about half. So the same insulin drugs that for a 3-month supply in Canada is about $450. Here in the States, for the same supply, it's $1,100. But special interests want to keep a monopoly on drug companies, and they want to make sure that they're making money. My opponents pointed out that there have been different folks who work for pharmaceutical companies that have supported me. I would argue that if you look at who's supporting who, sorry, I was right in the middle of a thought. I've bucked that trend every time, and I'm proud to do it.
Very nice.
You have an answer.
I missed the yellow.
Question for Carolyn?
Oh,
No, I have
totally
another
missed
question
it.
for her.
oh, it's different.
She's up. No, Carolyn's up. Well, she has a different question.
Let me answer both.
The Second Amendment specifies that we have a well-regulated militia. What regulations would you support to decrease the amount of gun violence in the USA?
The first thing I would do is fund the CDC so we can actually study gun violence in a comprehensive way. There was a legislative barrier to that just got removed, but I want our policy decisions on gun violence to be governed by science, not by emotion. So that's the first thing that I would do. Secondly, there's wide bipartisan support for comprehensive universal background checks, making sure that they are funded, and for doing things like closing the gun show's loopholes. So I would start there because that allows us to maintain our right to bear arms, to have a well-regulated militia, which I support, but would also allow common sense gun safety measures. We also should look at states like Washington, which have things like extreme risk protection orders that were passed with wide support within the state of Washington, and see if we can bring that nationally. I want to talk about the public option. The public option is different than single payer. I'm in favor of the public option. It means you buy insurance directly as an individual or an organization from the government. That has been my position all along. Now my opponent likes to pick and choose select parts of quotations. She gave these all to the press last time. I would ask anybody to watch and listen to my 70 hours of town halls where my position has been the same the entire time. I don't know who she's running against. I've been working hard. Fix the ACA. The Republicans are dismantling it. Make sure that people have pre-existing conditions are protected. That's lost under the Republicans who won't defend this law in court. After you stop the bleeding of the ACA, you pursue a public option, different than single payer. I can't believe I have to say this again and again and again, but it is deceptive and it is lying when you cherry pick positions and you say that that is your opponent's position. Facts do matter, integrity matters. Check out my positions, ask my supporters. I haven't changed them at all. But you know what I do provide? Nuance. Because you know what policy is? It's nuance. And I believe that on prescription drugs, when you take tens of thousands of dollars from the pharmaceutical industry and you give them a $43 billion tax cut, that's a problem. That's why corporate money in elections is problematic. So you should hold your elected officials and your challengers to the truth and do the fact checking, but make sure you don't cherry pick as is happening in this campaign.
At this time, we're going to give both candidates a chance to do a closing statement. It'll be a 2-minute time.
Would you like to go?
Sure. All right, thanks for coming. You get tired of me. Listen, I've been running hard for 10 months. I've been trying to meet as many constituents as possible. I've been trying to tell the truth. I've been trying to talk about policy, and I think we've been incredibly effective. We're running a strong civil campaign. The first ad that I came out with was talking about how great I was and all the things I was going to do for you. My opponent went negative with falsehoods right away. That tells you something. That tells you something about the person. All of my contrasts with my opponent have been about public policy. Her contrasts, on the other hand, are about misrepresenting my policy, but also saying things like, your child and your husband don't live with you. She went after my family in the first forum that we were at. She also has gone after my husband. Oh, your husband's a pharmaceutical rep, so we can't trust you on pharmaceuticals. Well, number one, he's a Republican. You can't trust him on a lot of things. But number two, and I'm joking, like he is a Republican, so is my family. Number two, I've got a specific plan for prescription drugs. I'm not going to import the problem to Canada. I'm going to fix it by allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices with the pharmaceutical companies. That is a specific plan the pharmaceutical industries hate, my husband hates, so that shows you how independent-minded I am. But it shows you the low blows that come in political campaigns and just how distressing it is for our democracy. Facts matter, integrity matters, and I got her on all that. Thank you.
So I do think facts matter, and I wish I was making this up. You know, I wish that if I felt like I lost or won this race, it would be a wash for the people I serve. I have fought hard for the greatest jobs market we've seen in a generation, and she has pledged to repeal all of it. She, quote, I hate the entire bill, I'd like to throw it all out. Boy, that clearly is out of touch with the people in this region, because jobs matter. We've seen real wages increase by 3%. We've seen 650,000 more jobs available in the US than there are people. That's not just one statistic. If you look around, there are help wanted signs. We haven't seen that in a long time. You know, I wish that I was merely misrepresenting her position on issues. Check out her quotes at different times to different folks. She said, do you ever see yourself supporting a Medicare type healthcare plan? She said, absolutely, absolutely. Long said she would vote for a so-called Medicare for All bill if Democrats win back control of Congress. Daily News in June. I wish these were all misrepresentations, because it would mean that she's not going to try and undo the economic progress that we've seen. But it's a $32 trillion gamble, folks. The progress we've seen in our economy, the wage growth, the growth in small businesses, she has pledged to undo all of it. She said she, quotes, wants to repurpose all of it. Now she's walking that back, because she's being held accountable to voters. Now it's not just a Democrat campaign rally where people say, go, go, go. Now she's having to we're holding our feet to the fire. And that's what I'm gonna do, because the people here deserve it. They deserve no less. I'm not gonna sit back and watch misrepresentations and mistruths, and quite frankly, she's either changing her position or she's not telling us the whole truth. Either way, you better believe I'm gonna make sure the people I serve know the contrast. On one hand, you've got the greatest jobs market you've seen in a generation. You see rising wages. 90% of Americans are seeing bigger paychecks, better benefits, better bonuses. And I want to see that keep going. Thank you.
A big round of applause for both the candidates. They did a great job. Very nice. Very well done. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming down here to Goldendale. Really appreciate that. I'm going to keep moving now, and I'm actually just going right off of the ballot here, and our next two candidates are going to be legislative district